Ladies and gentlemen, comedian, entertainer, Daniel Songer, now storyteller.
Hello, my fans. Daniel R. Songer, the writer of all the stories that you have heard and are going to hear a lot more throughout this year of 2018. I want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. This is Story Act number 258, titled The Irishman, and I hope you enjoy it. Writer Daniel R. Songer, The Irishman. He was born a multinational, but he favored the Irish side of him. He spent his days hanging out at the Irish pub. Each day he looked forward to meeting someone new and listening to their problems. The Irishman always had a way to relinquish the perfect remedy and emancipate the most awesome solution. The life and times of the Irishman at the Irish pub went from certain death to absolute evolution. It all started because of the Irishman's willingness to converse with the person sitting next to him. The first man the Irishman encountered came off like a very likable guy. At closing time, the guy asked the Irishman for a ride home. Being that the Irishman is one with a good demeanor and holds compassion for others, he gave the guy a ride home and was asked in for a beer. The Irishman began to feel chemically imbalanced. He had a high endurance to chemicals and knew that he had been drugged. The Irishman hightailed it out of there, only to find himself in a line of cars coming up to a sobriety test point. The officer asked the Irishman if he had been drinking. The Irishman just said no and managed to escape another tragedy. Even after that, the Irishman still went back to his favorite hangout, the Irish pub. Weeks went by with no trouble, and then the Irishman met another barfly. Wait, I don't want you to assume the story. No. The barfly asked the Irishman if he wanted to go to another bar. The Irishman agreed, but insisted that the barfly gives him a ride back to the Irish pub. After they closed down the dance club, the barfly drove back to his apartment and invited the Irishman in for a beer and replied, "I will give you a ride back to the Irish pub after we finish our beer." The barfly then hid his car keys and went to his bedroom saying, "I'm going to bed." The Irishman was outraged, but the barfly refused to give him a ride back to the Irish pub. The Irishman had no idea where he was at, but he left the apartment and started walking back to the Irish pub. It was in the dead of winter, and the Irishman had no winter coat. He had left his jacket in his vehicle. After 15 miles of walking with no luck of hitching a ride, hypothermia began to set in. Suddenly a car pulled over, and this good Samaritan gave the Irishman a ride back to the Irish pub. You might say the good Samaritan saved the Irishman's life. Still, after that, the Irishman, with so much dedication, went back to his domain, the Irish pub. Again, weeks and weeks went by with no trouble, and then came a new test or a new experience. The Irishman sat down next to a well-dressed man who replied, "Are you willing to join a family and give up your life for that family?" The Irishman knew exactly what the man was asking. He was definitely mafia. The Irishman simply replied, "Thank you for the opportunity, but I am a solo act." From that point on, the people that sat next to the Irishman became more and more interesting, and the conversations became more and more intellectual. The Irishman had now found purpose in his journey to the Irish pub. On his next visit to the Irish pub, he met a man who built a massive camera to watch the planet Mars. The Irishman was disturbed that the man was crying in his beer. The cameraman replied that the bureaucrats want to turn the camera around and point it at Earth and mount a laser to my camera. The Irishman already knew that any one of us can be taken out at any time. Then came the day the Irishman would long remember, and the last day of the Irish pub. The most intriguing gentleman on the planet sat down next to the Irishman and told him that he was a time traveler and that he is stuck here on the planet Earth and can't get back to his time. The time traveler had the means to build a spaceship, but could not build an engine to go faster than the speed of light. The time traveler gave the Irishman the knowledge of how to build a spaceship and then left the Irish pub with sad eyes. The Irishman wanted so desperately to help the time traveler make it back to his time. The Irishman then started out on the ultimate journey, the quest to build an engine that could go faster than the speed of light. Decades upon decades upon decades had consumed the Irishman with total defeat. Like every scientist throughout time, they accidentally discover the key to success. The answer came as easy as the combustion engine. The Irishman now had the engine to go faster than the speed of light. And the most important element, he had the key to make it happen. The Irishman constructed his spaceship and became a time traveler of all star constellations. His journey is everlasting, and his compassion will forever endure. Writer Daniel R. Songer, The Irishman. Thank you, and happy St. Patrick's Day.